You don't build your body out of parts that you inhale. With cigarette smoke, it's the toxicity begins and ends with the beginning and end of your cigarette. With vegetable oils, or say a French fry, there's toxins in the French fry, but then there's also unoxidized polyunsaturated fatty acids that are going to end up in your body fat. And that's where we get to a whole other layer of metabolic impacts that go beyond just the direct toxic effects and start to get into what we touched on earlier with, well, what does it mean when your body fat is full of stuff that your mitochondria can't use for energy? So that's why it's worse than cigarettes.
Dr. Cate is a brilliant, just exceptional practitioner. I've learned more about seed oils, PUFAs, the metabolism from her than anybody else. I'm constantly singing her praises. When I speak on stage, I'm always giving her shout outs. And I think that's important. As Dr. Cate would testify, you got to give credit where credit is due. And a lot of the things I've been teaching is a testament and credit to Dr. Cate. She is unique in the sense that she believes the first thing you should do to change your health and your metabolic condition is to get rid of these damaged fats as the first step. This session is very, very important. You're going to want to grab a piece of paper and take notes. Here's a formal introduction. She is the leading authority on nutrition and human metabolism, board-certified family physician with over 20 years of clinical experience. She's a New York Times bestselling author of The Fat Burn Fix, Deep Nutrition, a classic in the health scene, in the health space, and Food Rules. I have all of those books. Her experience is fixing the underlying problems that cause metabolic damage and inflammation, leading to autoimmunity, weight gain, diabetes, cancer, and accelerated aging process. Her passion is helping people feel their best. I actually have it right here, and I have it on Audible. I have all her books, paperback and Audible. This right here is a classic. Go get this book. She's also living in Florida like me. So without further ado, here is the amazing Dr. Cate Shanahan. Hey, Dr. Cate.
Hi, Ben. Thank you for such a lovely introduction. I love what you're doing here. This is great. You're helping so many people.
Thank you, Cate. And thank you so much for what you've taught me over the years. Every time I watch a video of yours or read something you wrote, it's just like light bulb moment after light bulb moment. And it actually inspires me to create content on it, which I love. So I want to thank you for your work. And her website is drcate.com. She has a lot of research on there. Before we dive into why you believe the first thing we should do is remove these bad fats, maybe you could give the audience a backstory of kind of your journey in the health space.
Okay, I'll try to keep it short because I'm old, right? So this could go on. But all the high points are I'm a medical doctor, but before I went to medical school, I trained in biochemistry. And my goal of being a biochemist was to get to the underlying causes of whatever people were suffering from. And my selfish thing was I had a lot of trouble with sports injuries, shin splints, Achilles tendonitis, and so on. So I wanted to be able to understand the underlying problem. That was why I went to school at Cornell it was genetics and molecular biology. So like I was sure I was going to be able to discover something really important there, but absolutely that just didn't happen. As genes and stuff are way so complicated, and we were just in our infancy. We were still doing stuff that now they did, now the sophisticatedness of what we did is in a COVID test, but it would take days to do that. And we were creating things by hand. It was very in its infancy. So I bailed on that. I went to medical school and had really given up on the dream of getting to the root cause of people's problems, and settled into just a routine of being a regular doctor, prescribing drugs, prescribing statins for people who had high cholesterol and were supposedly at risk of heart attacks and strokes and, all the usual stuff. And it was very unsatisfying other than, my patients were nice. I loved them. Occasionally I could actually help them. But when I got sick myself, then I went back down the rabbit hole of nutrition and discovered the gold buried underground. That was, to extend the metaphor maybe a little too much, but that was like the reality that cholesterol was never the bad guy. Saturated fat was never the bad guy. It's been seed oils. And since 1948, the American Heart Association has been lying to us about this because they got funding from
Mm.
from Crisco. And so like that realization changed everything about the way I practiced medicine. And I just kept on learning more things that seed oils do we've been eating seed oils in such ridiculous amounts. That's why I say they're the number one most important thing to understand about your health and change first about your diet.
Yeah. And so important because to your point, Dr. Cate, seed oils are everywhere. They're at the fanciest restaurants that you attend. They're at Whole Foods supermarket in the hot food bar. They're in all these packaged foods because they're cheap and these companies make a profit. And there's a lot of misinformation regarding seed oils. And you mentioned the American Heart Association. When I interviewed you on my Keto Camp podcast for the second time, you said that the American Heart Association is one of the biggest fake news propaganda organizations out there. Do you still believe that?
Absolutely. I mean, it is almost, you could say it's almost like the original fake news organization because they were pretty much launched to be that. Like they, before 1948, the pivotal year, they were a small and underfunded professional society of doctors who were interested in studying heart attacks. In 1948, they decided to accept outside funding, and their first benefactor gave them a whopping $1.7 million. That's in 1948 dollars, so it's about 10 times that today. And since then, they've just become a powerhouse. But the thing is, they've taken over the nutrition conversation. So the American Heart Association just pertains, to heart disease. But all the other medical organizations, the American Diabetes Association, the American Cancer Society, the Alzheimer's foundations looking into causes of childhood diseases and devastating diseases like autism, they turn to this one organization, the American Heart Association, the corrupt organization, for their nutrition information. And since 1948, they've just been pumping out so many publications that I hesitate because it's like, it seems like it's science and doctors believe it's science. They call them scientific publications, but it's not. It is simply propaganda. And that is such a devastating impact on the progress in medical health. It's stalled us completely. And in fact, we're going backwards in terms of our ability to make people healthy. And you can just look for the evidence of that in the headlines, like just more and more obesity. We got more obese. This is an interesting statistic. Between the year 2000 and 2020, we consumed an average of almost exactly identical calories the whole time, maybe 50 calories more by the end of that 20-year period. But we had the prevalence of obesity go from 14% in 2020 to 42%. And we have not been eating more calories. We have not been eating more carbohydrates or sugar. We've not been eating more grains or anything like that. What we've been eating more is the seed oils. So that, to me, right there, I was making the point of our health has gone backwards. Our health has not just gone backwards, it's gone backwards at an accelerating rate. And what we think as normal aging, we're getting these ideas from people who are now 80. Their experience of aging is going to be 10 times better than ours, yours and mine, especially like, if let's say we didn't even know about seed oils until today, that puts you at higher risk of accelerated aging and makes it all the more urgent to get off them, even though it's difficult to do the work to get off of them today. That is why I say it's the most important thing. We don't even have a way of estimating lifespan anymore that's accurate because it's been such a moving target. Seed oils are shortening our lifespan the more we eat them, and we're continuing to eat them at an accelerated and ever accelerating rate. So it's like an emergency.
It is. And that's alarming, that percentage of increase of obesity in just a couple of years. That study came out, a study came out in 2018, as you know, the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill study that showed about 88% of American adults are unhealthy. And then you explained that was before the last couple of years, and that got obviously worse, to your point. Harvard came out with that article last year that showed by the year 2030, about 50% of American adults will be obese. Judging by what you just said, it's probably going to be much faster than that unless we really become aware of the dangers of seed oils. And that is empowering because Dr. Cate's about to teach you more about the dangers of it. And then we'll go into some practical ways you can mitigate the damage. But one more point to make on the American Heart Association is that when we go to the grocery store, it could be a high-end grocery store or whatever, we see vegetable oil, seed oils with that stamp of approval from the American Heart Association. And people see that, and either consciously or subconsciously, they think it's safe. If they put their stamp of approval on there, it has to be safe. But how do they even get away with that if it's so damaging? And how much money is the American Heart Association being paid to actually put that stamp there?
Yeah, so like I know the figure used to be $750,000. For, I think it was a cereal company, and this was back in like 2005 or something like that. So they probably charge more. They get more money from bigger companies, and they probably just get more on average today to do that. But yeah, that's part of their funding. A huge portion of their funding comes, of course, from the drug companies, insurance companies, and hospital organizations, and the medical device companies that all basically are, part of this huge healthcare industry. And again, I hesitate because I hate to use a word that's completely inaccurate. It's like the ironically called healthcare industry, right? And a lot of people call it the sick care. Yeah. Or what did you just say?
Yeah. The sick care is what I just said. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, they don't care. It's worse than that.
Yeah. The no care industry. Yeah.
But so like the American Heart Association is a nonprofit. A lot of people think it's a governmental organization because the word American is right in there, but it's not. It's a nonprofit. They accept donations, and they accept donations from industry, and they are the best funded, mostly by industry, health organization in the country. Their budget is over $1 billion a year.
Wow.
That eclipses the American Heart Association by like several times. I'm sorry, the American Diabetes Association.
Okay, yeah, got it. So wow, that's insane. That's crazy. And it could be so confusing for people who want to be healthy, but then, and I'm sure you've gotten so many arrows. I'm getting a lot of arrows as I put more content out about this. There are doctors on social media, dietitians and nutritionists who believe that seed oils are healthy, and they have all these studies. Like, how do you navigate those waters? How do you teach people, like, that's what they're seeing, but what they're seeing is kind of from like muddied propaganda waters?
Yeah, so it depends who we're talking to. Like if I'm talking to like a patient who kind of gets it, that natural law or natural order really is what we should be studying and understanding, and trying to put our bodies in alignment with that natural law and natural order, by which I just mean, common sense things, the way people, always nourished our bodies. And I talk about that in detail in Deep Nutrition, but how we did that, those strategies. But so for those people, they already knew that. And that's fortunately a good portion of the population. Like, these are people who like, I always never thought, I always bought butter. So the hardest conversations are with the people who are personally invested themselves. They made their living, or they make money off of the idea that seed oils are healthy, right? And so that is going to be like your cardiologist, your standard dietitian, and most nutritionists, sports nutritionists. They're really, really miseducated, unfortunately. And those kinds of conversations, I just have to point them to like heavy duty research, right? And say, like, if you don't understand this research, then go back and study chemistry, biochemistry, organic chemistry, cell physiology, human physiology until you do, or just take my word for it. Right, because the truth is, the American Heart Association is a propaganda organization, and why should we take them seriously? I mean, they should be the ones on the defensive. They're the ones making the extraordinary claim. Like right now, we've all been brainwashed, right? We've all been brainwashed to believe that foods that people ate, foods like butter and eggs and meat, that people have eaten for thousands and thousands of years before the epidemic of obesity, heart attacks, diabetes, type 2 diabetes was practically non-existent. And until 1938, that was the first time it was characterized in Western medicine. So before all these chronic diseases, you have to understand that people were doing better. We didn't have antibiotics. We didn't live as long on average, but those people who survived it through infancy, the reason our lifespan was shorter was mostly because people died in infancy of infections.
Yeah.
But once you survived that, if you made it to 60, you were going to make it to 80. And if you made it to 80, you were healthy. And people who were 80 were healthy. Like everything was a little slower, but they weren't like in nursing homes needing, memory care. They weren't like on dialysis. Of course, it did sort of exist, but they were healthier. So the common sense things, we just need to tap into common sense and realize that the American Heart Association is making a claim that counters common sense. How is it that people could have been healthy later in life, free of all these diseases, while eating butter and eggs? How could they have done that? And by the way, most people that I speak to, they have a personal experience with this, not necessarily themselves, but with a relative or a grandparent or a friend's grandparent that like grew up in some other country and like they call them poor, but they actually were wealthy in terms of their ability to get nutrition because they took responsibility for doing it themselves. They raised their own food. They made sure they knew what the animals ate. They worked in harmony with the environment. They didn't think about it as like a hippy dippy feel good kind of thing. It was just like common sense. This is what we do. This is how you survive. And if you don't know how to survive, you're not going to. You will get sick. And it was just built into common sense. And so the American Heart Association, by telling us to avoid saturated fat, they're telling us to stop everything. They're saying, wait, hold it, evolution. I know human beings have come to this point eating saturated fat and eating eggs and living on animal products. And yeah, of course, we have some grains sometimes. In some circumstances, that was part of our evolutionary history. We have some vegetables sometimes, especially spices and things. But the American Heart Association is saying, forget that any of that happened. Close your eyes. Forget that. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. Listen to me. I'm telling you to eat this stuff that came from a factory. I mean, just based on the common sense level, right? That's what I feel like a lot of times is the best way to truth, right? Like because there's experts will battle it out forever, right? They're experts. They, by definition, use terms that non-experts don't necessarily understand very well. So I don't want, to be like the battle of the experts. I want to appeal to common sense. And I think that's where the money is, because common sense is, well, first of all, it's not actually that common, but it's a priceless thing. And when something makes common sense to you, when you think about the big enough picture, right, it's very important to understand the context, the big picture. How did humans get here? What did we used to do? Let's not pretend that we have to invent nutrition from scratch starting in 1948. People knew a lot about how to raise healthy children before then. If you look at our track record, it was better. So that's the kind of argument that I make. And I hope it works for a lot of people. I know it works for some, but I don't know like the portion.
Yeah, no, I love that. Common sense, does it make sense to introduce these factory oils? And I showed the group here on Monday, I think it was Monday, that video on YouTube, how canola oil is made. I mean, just looking at that process of how that's one of the seed oils, how canola oil is made. Like, does that look like something that's healthy for you? Just the whole the bleaching, deodorizing, and going through the machinery, it just doesn't make sense, right? It's like, look at that, and then how butter is made, or how olive oil is made. You're just pressing the olive oil. So that right there is like common sense. Just look at the two different ways they process that. And it's not just the American Heart Association. It's also, as you know, the Tufts University came out with that chart that showed, foods like Cheerios and frosted mini wheats should be encouraged, but foods like butter and eggs and red meat should be minimized. It's a big battle that we're facing. But I do believe those who have common sense see that chart and they laugh and they think this is backwards. Go ahead.
Another backwards thing, and the reason that the American Heart Association kind of gets away with fooling doctors about seed oils being healthy, is the fact that they lower cholesterol levels. Okay, so this is a whole other bomb that opens up a door to another conversation about cholesterol. Cholesterol doesn't indeed cause heart attacks. Like that, a theory was never proven. It's been disproven many, many times. Sure, there is cholesterol in atherosclerotic plaque, but how did it get there? Why is it there? And is it trying to seal up some damage, or is it what caused the damage? The American Heart Association says it's what caused the damage. And the American Heart Association says seed oils are healthy because they lower your serum cholesterol. But we actually have research that showed that the American Heart Association hid data from a study showing that for every 20 points that seed oils lower your cholesterol, they increase your chance of dying by something like 37%.
Whoa.
It's called the reappraisal of the Minnesota Heart Study. And every single doctor and healthcare practitioner needs to understand that study. And Harvard, that's why doctors think that seed oils are healthy, because we've been brainwashed to believe that cholesterol is bad. And so it's almost like the proof, right? When people stop eating seed oils and start eating healthy fats, their cholesterol will go up. And that's a good thing. That's what I tell people.
The ketogenic diet is all the craze these days. Rightfully so. Using keto could be a powerful way to achieve extraordinary health results. And if you're interested in keto, but just so confused by all the information out there, you're gonna wanna watch this video. If we're just meeting, my name is Ben Azadi. I'm the best-selling author of 4 books, including my recent book, the best-selling Keto Flex book. And I'm excited to share with you about a new 7-day Keto Kickstart Challenge where I'm gonna reveal my 4-pillar framework to achieving long-term results with keto and fasting. This 7-day challenge is 100% completely free. Me and the Keto Camp team are gonna teach you the blueprint that we've used to apply to thousands of our clients for amazing results. There's a lot of information out there, and it's enough to leave you confused, conflicted, and paralyzed with your thought process. What we're gonna do is take all that clutter and cut through the noise and give you a simple step-by-step 4-pillar framework so you could achieve extraordinary results with your health. I really want this to be your healthiest and best year ever, and this challenge is going to help you accomplish that. So what I want you to do is click the link around this video here, learn more about this 7-day Keto Kickstart Challenge, get signed up, and we'll see you in the 7-day Keto Kickstart Challenge.
Yeah, I mean, to what you said earlier, it's basic human physiology. What is cholesterol used for? The membrane is partly made up of cholesterol. It builds your sex hormones. The brain loves fat and cholesterol. And if your cholesterol is under 200, that's a problem. That's not the goal. And I remember my fiance, she used to have a corporate job, and some of the contests they used to run at her corporate job was rewarding employees who could get their cholesterol the lowest.
Yeah, it's really sad. It's just so misguided, and well-meaning people take it as truth because there seems to be so much research behind it, and it's all smoke and mirrors coming from the originating source is the American Heart Association, and they have intelligently aligned themselves with these pillars of respect, the elite Ivy Leagues, right? So you're going to see people at Harvard coming out and always defending seed oils. You're going to see people from Tufts and Yale and often Stanford and the Cleveland Clinic coming out and supporting the idea that seed oils are healthy, that cholesterol, there's no such thing as a good cholesterol level. Lower is better, always. That's what they say. It's just shocking. People who have a cholesterol level, when I graduated, normal cholesterol, the bad kind, was under 190. Today, that is like a red flag for you might have thyroid disease, or you might have a very dangerous condition called familial hypercholesterolemia. And you might need to go on infusions to transfer your blood out of your body, clean the cholesterol out, and give you your blood back. I mean, that is so far from what we actually need to be doing with our healthcare dollars. There's another movement towards getting LDL level down to lower than 40, not just with statins, but you have to use 3 drugs to do that. 3 expensive drugs. Like, we're spending billions of dollars in this hopeless, like, war on cholesterol that is, only going to make us less healthy.
Yeah, like same could go for cancer, same could go for diabetes, the same
Right.
could go for all these metabolic conditions. So let's get into seed oils, right? Let's explain to the group here what exactly chemical structure, what is a polyunsaturated fat, why are they so unstable? Something that I always mention, PUFAs, polyunsaturated fats, you always say PUFAs go poof, right? So explain what that means and how this works at a biochemical level.
Right. So the seed oils have a lot of these polyunsaturated fatty acids, which I'm just going to say PUFA, it's easier. And they biochemically are easily attacked by oxygen, and they become toxic once that happens. It's kind of like, we know that you don't want to like inhale cigarette smoke, right? That's an oxidation or combustion reaction happening there, and it just the stinky stuff is bad. That is toxic stuff. And in fact, indeed, seed oils, foods cooked in seed oils, especially deep fried, like French fries, they have some of the very same toxins that you inhale when you're inhaling cigarette smoke. And one of them is called crotonaldehyde. It's an aldehyde. And French fries have as much crotonaldehyde as cigarettes. It's literally a 1-to-1. So if you smoke a cigarette or eat a French fry, you're getting the same amount of crotonaldehyde. And I need to just say, this is not French fries fried in tallow, which is the traditional way of doing it. This is French fries, from a regular restaurant, where they now have to use soy oil or corn or one of the other seed oils that I group into the Hateful Eight category, just so people know there's a bunch of them. You got to kind of memorize the 8 of them, but that's it. Once you memorize that, you're 80% of the way home to improving your diet. It's a big first step.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And the Hateful Eight. So we went over that actually on Monday. I'm gonna name them again. It's a great way to remember these, because there are 3 C's, 3 S's, and then 2 others. So hopefully everybody has their pen and paper ready. I'll share them with them. So you have canola, corn, and cottonseed. Corn is also called rapeseed in the UK. So if you live in the UK, keep in mind corn, canola, cottonseed. Those are the 3 C's. You have soybean, safflower, and sunflower. Those are the 3 S's. And then you have grapeseed and you have rice bran oil. Those are the Hateful Eight, right, Dr. Cate?
Perfect. Yes, absolutely. And yeah, canola is a brand of rapeseed oil. And so they love it in Canada, of course. And it's becoming more popular in Europe too, where they do call it, I think, rapeseed there.
And so these are called PUFAs, polyunsaturated fats. They're also called linoleic acid. I think the half-life, I think it was you who told me the half-life, meaning if we got rid of these vegetable oils today, how long will half of them remain in our body fat? You said, I think 2 years or so would be the estimation.
Yeah. So if you're normal weight, then that's about 18 months. If you're overweight, presumably it's longer, just because there's more. And the half-life means the time to which half of it is cleared out. So it also depends on how active you are. So, the role of exercise and burning calories can kind of help accelerate that a little bit, but you don't want to push the issue. Even though I think, though, Ben, it's really important to point out that even though it does take a long time to get them all cleared out, like maybe 4 or 5 years when all is said and done, because half-life just means half. So when you double that, now you've got 3/4 of them out, right? So that's like, that sounds daunting and like, I can't wait that long to feel good. Well, the good news is you feel good like the first day you stop eating them and balance your diet in a healthy way. Like, for example, with the keto diet, or I recommend a variation on the keto diet too, for some people for whom the keto diet just doesn't quite appeal, or they don't feel like they can do it. I have a variation on it that I found works really well. I talk about that in my fat burn fix, but I fully support the keto diet. In fact, I talked about that in the fat burn fix too, and how people can tell when maybe they are ready to use it, even if they weren't maybe at the beginning. But so these 8 Hateful Eight oils they build up in your body fat, and they don't give your energy producing mitochondria a decent fuel. They're not a good fuel. And so every cell in your body, your muscles, your brain, they generate energy, ATP energy, in these little things called mitochondria. And research shows that when you kind of force cells to use polyunsaturated fatty acids, PUFAs, whether they're omega-6 or omega-3, actually both are polyunsaturated fatty acids, right? So because a lot of people have heard that like omega-3 is you got to supplement that, but like you don't really have to, because it is a worse fuel even. The more double bonds, the worse they do in terms of allowing your body to give you energy. They damage mitochondria when the mitochondria are forced to burn polyunsaturated fatty acids. So they start shutting down your cell because it's not getting the energy it needs. And this is kind of a key thing here. This part, like what I'm going to say next, has to do with why people crave sugar and carbohydrates. Because when your cells aren't getting energy from fat, from your body fat, there's always a little sugar in the bloodstream, and they're going to start sucking that in, and that's going to make you feel hypoglycemic. It's going to drop your blood sugar level, and that's why people crave sugar. And that's also why people develop insulin resistance and diabetes. And I described that in Pepper and Fix. If there's anybody really like on the expert level that wants to know the details about that, but yeah, I think it's a really important, like that's my hypothesis about what drives insulin resistance, because so far no one's got one that makes sense to me. Like people have hypotheses, there's others, they don't make sense to me. So I had to come up with something that I felt looked at the big picture and really explains everything that I've seen in clinic and everything that helps people like get better, and all the problems that people stumble into if they keep eating seed oils and don't kind of like balance their meals in a certain way. When they have type 2 diabetes, it really helps to balance your meals with just a little bit of slow digesting carbohydrates. Some people just need that, not to get you over like into a high carb diet. You'll still be in a carb control diet, but
it'll still be low carb compared to the standard American diet. Yeah.
Yes.
So you said a few things that are very interesting. You mentioned omega-3, like you're referencing fish oil, and fish oil has 5 double bonds, I believe.
Yeah. So there's they've got omega-3 fatty acids always have more double bonds for the same number of carbons than omega-6. And so fish oil has 20 carbon and a 22, I believe, or else it's 24 carbon. Like there's two types in fish oil. It's the EPA and the DHA. And so, yeah, one of them has like 4 or 5 and the other has 5 or 6, but it's a lot. It's too many for, your mitochondria. They cannot use it for fuel. We're not supposed to have that much, in our diet. We're not supposed to force our mitochondria to use that for fuel. But because of their chemical nature, very often they end up in the mitochondria when we eat too much. And we are eating a lot of omega-3. It's just that the reason people can still be deficient in omega-3, even though they're eating so much, has to do with the fact that it's so reactive with oxygen that it just gets destroyed inside your body. So like you eat it, but it gets oxidized before it makes its way to your brain or your tissues. So that's why I say, to most people, you don't need to supplement. You just need to stop the seed oils because they're causing oxidation that destroys omega-3, right? And, and some things, maybe it feels a little better if you have, to supplement with omega-3 until you've gotten your oxidation in your body under enough control that the natural omega-3 always in your diet won't get destroyed anymore. So some people benefit, but like I wouldn't know how to pick out that person. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's so much safer to just
eat the fish.
Yeah. Yes. And also stop the seed oils. They've done studies on fish oil that show that they increase something called sudden cardiac death when you supplement fish oil. And partly that could be because the fish oil was oxidized and they were eating toxin. Partly it could be just because it's just too much PUFA in their body and it just doesn't help. And they supplement with quite a bit, several grams. It's a lot.
Yeah, I love this conversation because I'm totally aligned with you on the fish oil thing, but it goes against even people that I respect and I adore in our keto space, in our health space. They're talking about taking 1 to 2 grams of fish oil each day. They're recommending it. And I think from my research, the NIH did a study on how much EPA and DHA does the brain actually need for an adult human being. And it was 7.2 milligrams from what I saw. And one capsule of fish oil is 1,000 milligrams. People are doing 2,000. That doesn't make sense. It's just a super physiological overdose of omega-3.
Absolutely. And yes, oxidation science is extremely complicated. I don't think I would even have like gone down that rabbit hole or understood it had I not just so happened to study exactly that when I was at Cornell. Like it was the biochemistry and molecular biology department. And I had a whole course where we talked about polyunsaturated fatty acid oxidation and the different spin states and, what type of oxygen there's like, what type of oxygen there's like superoxide versus hydroxide can react with which fatty acid. I mean, like that was all like part of my education. And then here, at the same time, I had no idea I was eating a ton of the stuff, right? And so it wasn't until I got sick, then I was like, wait a second, that's what we're eating? Oh my God, no wonder we're sick. So,
that class sounds awesome. I would have loved to do that class. I first learned about the dangers of fish oil through my mentor, Dr. Pampa, who's interviewed you. And it was a whole paradigm shift to me because I was taking it for years and, recommending it for years. And then I was like, whoa, this is actually, I'm just going to eat the fish and avoid the fish oil. Most of it's already rancid. And even the best fish oil could go rancid if it mixes with warm body temperature, stomach acid, but we're just doing too much of it in general. So it's best to just eat the fish. And first and foremost, number one, remove the seed oils and then eat the fish and do all the other things. Seed oils is the number one thing here we're talking about. So we mentioned the Hateful Eight. What about things like peanut oil, which is a very popular question? What are your thoughts on peanut oil?
So, doing the kind of calculation that I did to create that Hateful Eight group, peanut oil was one that it was sort of like not great, but it's still like, it was almost bad. It was almost not good enough to make the cut, right? Because it has a good amount of polyunsaturated fatty acid in it. But here's some of the reasons that it still makes the cut. First of all, it's been cultivated specifically for use as food for many thousands of years. It actually originated in Africa, where they call it ground nut because it grew on the ground instead of trees. And so cultivation usually of an oil seed makes it more oily, right? So olives originally, before we thousands and thousands of years ago, they probably did not so easily release oil, but after cultivating them for a long time, they became more oily. Same with the peanuts. And so because of that, just that they are so oily, you don't need to treat them with harsh pressure chemical treatments, industrial scale treatments to extract a reasonable amount of oil. And so that it's kind of like analogous to olives that way. There's peanut oil that is unrefined, and I recommend that. That actually I think is good because there's a lot of antioxidants in there that stabilize the PUFA during cooking. The same way with olive oil, like you want to use the more extra virgin, the best that you can afford, because the lower grades of it are not as good. They're not as heat stable. So peanut too. So peanut oil that has a flavor generally has to be unrefined peanut oil. It will taste like peanuts. It will be delicious. That is the good. That is good. That's in the good category. I have a middle category because, we need one. The peanut oil that is refined is in that middle category. It's okay because it's way better than the seed oils. It doesn't have toxins in it, and it's nowhere near as bad when you cook with it, but it doesn't have the nutrition. It's mostly empty calories, and it's not quite as heat stable.
So that's, you're saying if you're cooking with it, but here's where I want the group here to understand. If you go to a restaurant, I think Chick-fil-A uses peanut oil unrefined. It's very different when you're getting peanut oil from a restaurant versus cooking it at home, even if it's unrefined or refined, because they reuse the oils for days to weeks. My mom used to work, I don't know if you knew this, Dr. Cate, but my mom used to work at Kentucky Fried Chicken when I was a kid. So she brought me home PUFAs and I would eat it. But she would tell me she would only bring the fried chicken home on the day when they change the oil, and they wouldn't
Okay.
change the oil for 14 to sometimes 17 days,
Oh my God.
refrying it. So even if it's peanut oil and it's unrefined or refined, if it's at a restaurant, you don't know if that's the same day they change it or if it's going to be like 7 or 14 days old.
Great point. And absolutely would be better to use tallow. And it only costs twice as much, roughly, as the seed oils. So it's not like olive oil, which would be prohibitively expensive. Tallow is actually the best. But the truth is that deep frying in a restaurant, like you say, is a different scenario because of the abuse of the oil, or what the toxicologists call it, thermal stress. Thermally stressed oil is just going to be toxic. That kind of cooking is never really something you should live on, But unfortunately, that it's the easiest way to get people who don't have a culinary background to make something that their customers will still like because it's crunchy and it's done, and it's uniform. So that's why you see it all over the place, and even in sit-down restaurants. And they do the same procedure of hardly changing the oil because it is expensive.
So the better options are going to be saturated fats, monounsaturated fats. You already listed a few. So unrefined peanut oil could be fine. Olive oil that's extra virgin in a dark glass bottle that's not cut with a soybean or a canola. You got to find out if it's cut. So real olive oil would be great. Avocado oil, same thing. Make sure it's not cut. You said beef tallow. What about coconut oil, butter, ghee, duck fat, lard? What about those?
Yeah, cooking with all those at home is absolutely 100% great. It's delicious. It's traditional. And something that French and Italian chefs do is they'll combine olive oil with butter because the two kind of protect each other, right? So olive oil has a slightly higher smoke point, so you don't get like too much browning. And the butter has the saturated fat, which protects the small amount of PUFA that's in olive oil. So it's and
I'm
this
gonna start doing that.
Yeah, it's really good. And pan frying at home is typically a short process, right?
Yeah.
You're just like, it's something thin usually. It's not going to be more than half an hour usually. And it's also, well, I don't know if you want to talk about smoke point, but that kind of throws a lot of people.
Well, I mean, I do want to talk about it because my understanding is that it's not the main thing that we pay attention to, right? The smoke point fallacy. These vegetable oils have high smoke points. So yeah, maybe let's bust that myth of smoke points.
Yes, it is a fallacy, right? I think it's kind of like a selling point that the seed oil industry created. So smoke point just simply refers to the point at which the oil gets hot enough to have like browning happen in the bottom of the pan, or some smoke being emitted. And it has no way, shape, or form an indicator of how stable the oil is to molecular deterioration. And in fact, you want browning on your food. Like if you want to cook, not oysters, those round ocean things, scallops.
Scallop.
Yeah, scallop. If you want to cook those, you want a little brown on there, and that you're not going to get that in a high smoke point oil so fast, but you will get it from butter or that butter olive oil mix. It just takes like 20 seconds, and the food never gets to the smoke point of the oil. Like the food doesn't get to be 400 degrees on a stovetop. You don't need it to be cindering hot like that. It'll turn meat into rubber, and anything just gets ruined. So seed oils with their high smoke point is good for a busy restaurant where people don't really pay attention to the tenderness and the quality of the food. It's a way of making it easy for a busy kitchen, but it totally creates toxins, and it allows you to overcook your food, relatively overcook it, forces you to relatively overcook it because it delays the browning. And also heat destroys the nutrition in your food, right? So you just want to cook your food to the minimum amount that you like it at, and don't go beyond that, because every more like minute on that stove, you're incinerating some vitamins, you're fusing proteins, you're just making stuff less bioavailable. So the least amount of cooking that gives you the flavor you like is always the best.
Yeah. And what I do, I learned this from TJ Robinson from the Fresh Pressed Olive Oil Club. I actually, when I cook on a non-toxic pan, I heat it up. And then once it's heated, then I add the oil. So I'm not heating, the oil is not added until it's already hot, but I don't over, fry things or cook things. To your point, that's just a general rule of thumb to follow. I have a couple more questions for you. And for those who are VIP, if you want, we're going to, in about 5 minutes, and then we'll get you off by 1 p.m. your time so we don't take too much of your time. So we have about 15 minutes left. So in about 5 minutes, the VIP members who want to come on the live stream and ask Dr. Cate a quick question, just get into the StreamYard studio. I see a few of you are back there. Your camera needs to be turned on. Your mic needs to be on. So we'll get to that. But I have 2 questions. All right. This is going to be an interesting one. Okay. So if somebody has 3 options, and this is a hypothetical because it's not really realistic, but here are the 3 options. 3 vices. I'm going to smoke cigarettes each day. Option 1. I'm going to eat sugar, high amounts of processed sugar each day. Option 2. Or I'm going to eat vegetable oils each day. Which option is worse?
Eating the vegetable oil each day. That was easy.
Easy. Okay. Explain why it's worse than smoking every day and sugar every day.
You don't build your body out of parts that you inhale. With cigarette smoke, it's the toxicity begins and ends with the beginning and end of your cigarette. With vegetable oils, or say a French fry, there's toxins in the French fry, but then there's also unoxidized polyunsaturated fatty acids that are going to end up in your body fat. And that's where we get to a whole other layer of metabolic impacts that go beyond just the direct toxic effects and start to get into what we touched on earlier with, well, what does it mean when your body fat is full of stuff that your mitochondria can't use for energy? So that's why it's worse than cigarettes. And it's worse than sugar too, because, sugar is empty calories, but empty calories build body fat. Sugar turns into normal body fat that humans have carried around for a long time. What do I mean by that? What's normal body fat? I mean, the fatty acids are monounsaturated and saturated mostly. That is supposed to be what we have in our body fat. But when we eat PUFAs, they end up in our body fat as PUFAs. And so these days, instead of just like a 5% PUFA in our body fat, many people are walking around with 40%. And that's where they get into this other layer of metabolic problems that, has to do with diabetes and all these tragic, terrible diseases, cancer, Alzheimer's, and so on.
That is super interesting. I did not know that about sugar turning into saturated and monounsaturated fat. What about high fructose corn syrup? Does it also turn into that, or is that something different? Same thing.
I mean, table sugar and high fructose corn syrup are almost identical molecularly, because high fructose corn syrup is just higher fructose than regular. And so, but it's a combination of sucrose and fructose, just like table sugar is a combination of sucrose and fructose. So, and when you break it down, it's the same. Like once your body can't tell whether a molecule of fructose came from a banana or from high fructose corn syrup. It's identical. So it's really, when it comes with sugar, it's like the total amount, right? So I don't advocate, you can get all the sugar you want as long as it comes from fruit. No.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so, and also I agree with avoiding vegetable oils first, worse than sugar and cigarettes. Even with the sugar part, you could, stay active, go for a walk, do some squats, and that excess glucose you could use as energy, put it into your glycogen stores, burn it off. But those vegetable oils, they stick around for a very long time. Last question before we get into VIP. What do you do when you go to a restaurant? What's a practical tip you can give? Because when we go to restaurants, they're using these bad fats, even the best restaurants. So what do you do at restaurants?
Well, usually I do a little legwork beforehand and try and see, okay, what, is there anybody around? And so here in Orlando, I've found multiple restaurants that have multiple dishes that are totally seed oil free. And one of them is a chain. It's called Four Rivers. And there's 4 locations, and they do like grass-fed beef. It's really awesome. Just giving them a shout out.
Yeah.
And but if you don't have the option of doing that legwork and you don't know you're kind of going to a safe house, what can you do as like on the fly? Well, in those situations, let's say it is a sit-down restaurant where they do some cooking in their own kitchen. It's not like all fast food. you say, is there anything that you can cook for me in butter? Like, do you have like a fish you could just cook in butter? And I mean actual butter, not butter oil. And you have to specify that, because these days a lot of restaurants will use like a fake butter spread.
Yep.
Or if you don't have actual butter, then like real olive oil. Or, you know, is there anything that you can cook without any oil, right? Like you can steam certain things, you can steam, you know, some seafood and stuff like that. And so usually so far, I've been able to deal that way. In the chain restaurants, then it's kind of a matter of taking out usually the carby things, because so like say take Taco Bell, you can get a Taco Bell taco salad without the shell, and the shell has tons of seed oil in there. And that's why a lot of people get benefits when they go on a low carb diet without even thinking about seed oils, because they're cutting out these carbs that are saturated with seed oils. And when you go to Taco Bell for your taco salad, you can top it with avocado and cheese, and you'll have lots of ground beef in there if you like, and, you know, get healthy natural fats that way. So that kind of strategy of, okay, well, what's the worst thing here? Is there anything in here that doesn't have seed oils? How can I make a meal out of that?
That's great. Fantastic tip. I love that. And that's going to be so useful because they're everywhere. And there's going to be a situation where you're at a restaurant and you got to explore those options. What I typically do, I tell the waiter or the waitress that I'm allergic to vegetable oils. And I'm like, do you have real butter, real olive oil? And they typically do it. But when I say the allergic thing, then they pay attention, right? And I'm not really lying. We're all kind of allergic to these vegetable oils. So there's some.
We are.
We are. Okay.
It's not a lie.
It's not a lie. Okay. We have about 8 minutes. So I see Erica Helen has the camera on. Erica, do you want to come on here and ask Dr. Cate your question? She does. Let's keep it to maybe 2 minutes each so we could get Dr. Cate off. So here is Erica Ward.
First of all, thank you so much. So very interesting. I've been keto and cut out sugar. I'm not as diligent about seed oils, but that's about to change. I could talk to you for an hour, but I'm going to keep it short. I'm going to ask my easy questions. Do you have a link to that data that you said the AHA hid about seed oil and cholesterol?
I do. Yeah. So if you go to my website, which is drcate.com, and it's Dr. DRCATE, just 6 letters, and type in cholesterol, that will take you to a hub of all the articles I've written about cholesterol. And one of them specifically, the title is about the American Heart Association has been lying. I think it's called Cholesterol is Good. The American Heart Association is bad.
Okay. Now I have a little bit of a longer one, but you do it as quick as you can. Omega-3, omega-6. 3 is the good, 6 is the bad.
3 is the one that we lose first. So some people supplement it. Neither one is good or bad. It's actually a myth that one is pro-inflammatory and one is anti-inflammatory. And that's kind of a long story to explain why that myth ever started, but it has to do with how aspirin works. But
can you give me a resource for that so I can look that up after this? Because I'm big into the omega-6 and omega-3. I'd like to know. I'd like to understand that better.
Well, what you can do is you can Google metabolism, cyclooxygenase metabolism, alpha linolenic acid. Okay.
And I'm going to ask you to put that in the comments.
I'll get that to you. Dr. Cate's website, by the way, Erica and everybody else, is Dr. Cate, so CATE.com. Yeah. She has all the research on there, the Hateful Eights on there. A lot of the research that I get, I just go directly to her website. But I'll get that info for you, Erica.
Okay, I'm good then. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next question from Helen. I'm going to ask the question from her. She's here. She's a VIP member. Helen says, how can we release from our bodies the stored fat that has been stored from years of eating the wrong oils?
Great question. Okay, so the more that you burn your body fat, the more that will happen. And the benefit of intermittent fasting is that it kind of accelerates that process. The downside of it is that not everybody, in my experience, is able to just jump right into that. And so I kind of call not snacking between meals a baby step towards intermittent fasting. Yeah. And I focus on building meals that give you sustainable energy. But the more you burn your body fat, the more you are accelerating the process. And eating a wholesome, balanced diet helps your body cope with the fact that the only way that you're going to get your body composition to be lower in polyunsaturated fatty acids is by burning them. So that's you really have to fortify your body, and I talk about how to do that in the Fat Burn Fix.
Yeah, Fat Burn Fix is great. It's on Audible and paperback, so depending on how you like to get your books. Next question is from Lynn. What about oils that we use, essential oils like jojoba, calendula, and almond oil? Are those bad for you as well?
So if we're talking about like skin products, I think everything you mentioned actually has a pretty good fatty acid profile. And in fact, traditional nuts and fruits used for skin just so happen to have pretty good fatty acid profiles. And even so, they don't really get absorbed into the bloodstream through the skin. So it's a different conversation. I mean, it's not as good for your skin, but it really begins and ends with your skin if you're putting a PUFA-based product on your skin. So it kind of depends how you're using the oil. But usually, even if you're taking them internally, it's a small amount.
Got it. So yeah, those that were mentioned sound okay. They're not like taking soybean on their skin or canola. So that's a different story. Scott Rennie says, how long will omega-3 leave the body since I've been taking 5,000 milligrams daily for a year, is what Scott said.
Well, so it's the same rate, right? It's a half-life is the same. It's stored in your body fat. And so that half-life is 18 months if you have a normal body composition. It's probably a little bit longer if you have excess body fat. So it's just going to take longer to exchange it all out. So yeah, so it takes a while. But like I say, it's not like that did a particular worse damage to you than just eating seed oils. It's kind of all part of the big picture and shows up in things like low HDL and high triglycerides, elevated liver enzymes, and all of that resolves as soon as you stop taking in the damaging things and get on a wholesome fat real food diet. The numbers don't get perfect the next day, but they start improving.
And you'll feel better immediately as you make these changes. Dr. Cate, thank you so much for your brilliance. And I just love your energy. You're funny, you're intelligent, you're a Floridian now like me. And where else can they check you out? drcate.com. Anywhere else you want them to go?
Yeah, just look in the sky for my big inflated head floating around. Thanks to your comments.
I mean it. I admire what you've been doing. I learned so much from you.
Thank
Even
you.
today, I learned so much. Yeah.
No, seriously, thank you. So yeah, drcate.com, that's the hub for where to find me. And I do have my socials listed there. So I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on LinkedIn mostly.
We'll get all that. Alina will post all that. So Dr. Cate, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you. You could feel free to sign off. I'm going to continue the stream, but we are very grateful for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's always a pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise. We'll talk soon. That was so good. And I know a lot of that information was technical. So you got the replay. Watch it again. Listen to it again. She's so brilliant. I would start, she has a few books. She has Fat Burn Fix and she has Deep Nutrition. Fat Burn Fix is more digestible, meaning it's easier to read and follow versus Deep Nutrition, which has some components that are technical. So depending on where you are at in your studying, you might want to start with Fat Burn Fix. She talks a lot about keto and, she mentions what we teach, which is keto flexion. She just has a different vocabulary for it. But this is the classic book right here. This is the one where you'll ask Dr. Fung, ask Thomas Lauer, ask Ken Berry, one of their favorite books in their top 5 category. And this is going to be in there because it's a classic. So it's just a little technical and it's big, but it's amazing. It's absolutely incredible. So she was awesome.